to the final hour on a Wednesday morning on the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. The Pope's in town. We've got all kinds of things happening. Hillary Clinton says she's against the Keystone XL pipeline. We've got new polls out there that show Joe Biden surging. In the Democratic polls, we've got Trump now at 28.5% in the Real Clear average, Real Clear Politics average, leading by 10 points. And by the way, Carly Fiorina not up to third or second in those polls yet. Marco Rubio is third. I think it's 7%, along with Jeb Bush and others. So it's still interesting, all this stuff going on. And meanwhile, the gotcha questions are out there. They talk about, would you have a Muslim as a president? One of the questions asked over the weekend, and of course, last week there was apparently a listener in one of the stops that Trump made who screamed out that President Obama is a Muslim. And, of course, Trump didn't say anything. And, of course, later on was asked, why didn't you defend the president? He said, it's not my job to defend the president. He said, that's the first time I've ever gotten in trouble for something I didn't say. Well, then later on, that paled by comparison to what, on Meet the Press over the weekend, Ben Carson was asked. And he said he'd be uncomfortable with a Muslim as president. A lot of people have written about that and asked about it and talked about it since then. And one of those people have been Dr. John Zmirak, who is a columnist for The Stream. And he joins us here this morning on the Gary Sutton Show about the column that he wrote regarding that. Dr. John, great to have you back on the show. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your take on that when you saw the question asked over the weekend and you heard Ben Carson answer. And then later on, he amplified his answer by saying, I would be opposed to anybody who would want to make a theocracy or would have some question about their particular beliefs interfering with the constitutional rights here in America. What's your take?
I agree with Mr. Carson on this point. I think he wasn't saying, as Ted Cruz suggested, Carson wasn't saying that there should be a religious test for candidates. That's explicitly ruled out in our Constitution. He was saying, could he have a religious test as a voter? And I think each one of us is free to have whatever kind of test we want as a voter. So, what would a personal litmus test as a voter make sense? In other words, should you consider voting for a Muslim candidate? Well, my question would be, what kind of Muslim are we talking about? Are we talking about a believing Muslim or a bad Muslim? Because a believing Muslim should never be elected to public office in the United States because devout believing Muslims are committed by the tenets of their religion, which they take very seriously, to Sharia law. Sharia law is, according to Islam, the universal legal code for the entire human race, was created by Allah, revealed to Muhammad, and is valid for every nation on earth until the end of time and can never be revised in any way. And according to Sharia, there's a death penalty for women who commit adultery, death penalty for homosexuals who act on it, severed hands for stealing. Most distinctly, if you enter Islam and then you later leave, there's the death penalty for that, according to Sharia law. And that penalty is imposed in countries like Pakistan by mob justice, and it has been imposed in the past in Saudi Arabia. So if you want to look at Islam in action, look at the Muslim equivalent of the Vatican, which is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the guardian and the official interpreter of Islam for the Sunni world. All those laws are on the books. You have thieves having their hands chopped off. You have homosexuals and people accused of adultery stoned to death. All these things happen. So to suggest that Ben Carson was being a racist or something because, first of all, Islam is not a race. There are white Muslims.
Right.
There are Arab Christians. Hello? So your religion is not something you're born with that you can't change. It's something you choose. Although, of course, if you're in a Muslim country and you want to choose to leave Islam, you might face the death penalty. So, no, I don't think you'd want somebody with those extreme fringe views serving in public office in the United States, just as you wouldn't have, before Vatican II, you wouldn't have wanted a Catholic who believed in imposing the Spanish Inquisition.
Exactly.
The Church at Vatican II definitively renounced the idea of persecuting non-Catholics. As a Catholic, I'm embarrassed to say that it took until 1964, the year where I was born, for the Church to renounce the Inquisition, but at least we did it. Islam never has. And I don't see there's any way that it will.
So when you look at this and you say, okay, and what about a religion that has a role for women that is subservient to men? I would dare say if you went out today and you campaigned as a candidate and you said, okay, and forget about Islam for a minute. You go out as a candidate and say, by the way, I believe that women have a subservient role to play and they should cover their faces here in society. They should have to wear a special hat and they should have a subservient role to men in the society. How many votes do you think you might garner in the long run?
That's right. That's right. But the irony is that the multiculturalist feminist left generally sticks up for Islam and accuses people who criticize it of Islamophobia. What they've done is they've created this invented crime of Islamophobia, and they've tried to equate it with racism. But racism is inherently irrational because it is judging someone based on skin color and eye shape and hair texture. It has nothing to do with their personal character. Religion? Is anybody willing to say that your religion has nothing to do with your morality or your personal character? I mean, sure, if you're John F. Kennedy, it doesn't. But if you're a serious believer in your religion, if you're Joe Biden, it doesn't. Look at Joe Biden. He just yesterday gave an interview to a Catholic magazine where he talked about he's a devout Catholic and devoutly pro-choice. He thinks abortion is killing, but he thinks it should be legal. Yeah. That kind of incoherence.
How do you do that?
You're a liberal Democrat, and they can do all sorts of Jedi mind tricks.
When you put politics in there, a lot of us can do a lot of things and try to explain it, but it gets kind of like a circle conversation. It always kind of comes back to the beginning, and you still haven't explained very much of anything. When you look at Carson comes back a few days later and says, "Hey, you know what? Here's what I meant. I don't think I have to apologize for anything." We're in a time right now, Dr. Zmirak, where people, I hadn't realized just how politically correct we had become until we saw Trump and Carson and others come on the scene here. And they don't apologize for the statements, and yet it is expected of them to kowtow to the media and kowtow to what is portrayed as popular public opinion, when in reality we're finding out that maybe popular public opinion isn't always on the side of the media, and people are opening their eyes and saying, oh, take a look at this. Maybe this isn't the way all of us are thinking in this country. Your thoughts on that?
That's right. People getting browbeaten by the other people's Facebook profile photos or the bags of sexually diverse Doritos. I mean, what you have is political elites and corporate elites in America cooperating and trying to shove the country leftwards on cultural issues and use the power of the law wherever possible to coerce people in that socially progressive direction. And what has been refreshing to hear Donald Trump bash these people. I don't see him as a serious presidential choice, but I think he's been a positive influence on the debate, and I think he's broadening the range of the debate and making people take very seriously the issue of immigration. I mean, I just read yesterday, we have the highest percentage of the population that are immigrants in more than 100 years.
Yeah, I was just reading an article about that this morning. That we've also had a 93% increase in immigration from places like Saudi Arabia. You mentioned them a little bit ago. Bangladesh up 37%, Iraq up 36%, Egypt up 25%, Pakistan, India, Ethiopia all up 24%, Nigeria and Ghana up 21%. So I mean, you look at the numbers of immigrants. We often talk about coming across our southern border. Talk about the people that are being brought into the country, and now with the migrant flow out of places like Syria, we're talking about bringing more and more people here, and one would start to ask the question, how many people can we take in this country?
Well, I guess we don't have members of every single Islamic terrorist group in the world forming a cell in America. So we need to import. We don't have the Nigerian variety. We don't have Boko Haram in America yet. We do have the Somalian terrorist group, Al-Shabaab. There's a place that they call Little Mogadishu in Minnesota. That's a short drive from the Mall of America. Well, a few months back, the Somali Islamist group Al-Shabaab issued a call for Somalians in Minnesota to attack the Mall of America, which brings to the question, why are there Somalians in Minnesota? Why were they refugees resettled? What there was no safe country for those Somali refugees to go to between Somalia and the United States of America. There was just no safe place for them to go.
I haven't seen Saudi Arabia importing people. I haven't seen a number of these other countries that are right there importing people. And one has to ask the question, why is that? Maybe they don't feel like importing unwittingly or wittingly more terrorists into their country. And you realize...
I'm sorry. I think that Saudi Arabia is sympathetic with these Islamist groups. They want to seed the West with Muslims, with Islamists, with potential terrorists. This is part of a conscious strategy of jihad, of stealth colonization of the West by Muslims with many Muslim radicals in their midst. It's just the way they've colonized Belgium and they've colonized the Netherlands. They're colonizing France and England. They want to do it to the United States. And I've been pretty appalled at the kind of statements about immigration that we've heard coming from Pope Francis, who cares enough about the persecution of Christians in countries where Muslims have taken over. He should not be using his office to help Muslims take over more countries so they can persecute the Christians.
You know, it is amazing to me right now, as we watch all this happening before us, that we are as naive as we are in the world. There are many, I'm sure, who are listening to us right now saying, oh, man, you must hate immigrants and all that. It's not about any of that. It's about time for us to get away from the passionate, I hate people side of the argument, which I think in most cases is untrue, to more the side of the argument of what is the end run that's being done here on all this. And I think that's what you're kind of alluding to here, the whole end run that's happening. And jihad is not taking the form as it did back in the very old days of going after people violently in this world. It's going in and just peaceably kind of wiping out the basic principles of a country.
Well, look, if you had a choice, you wanted to take over a continent, and you could either conduct a violent invasion where the residents fight back, or you could just ship all your people in peacefully and they could vote themselves into power.
Right.
Which would you do?
Second.
And what did the Europeans do with the Indians? We landed, we said we came in peace, we traded with them, and we took the entire continent away from the Native Americans. That is exactly what's happening in Europe with Islam.
And people say
they looked at the playbook.
And people say, well, they're not doing it right now. Well, they are doing it right now. It's just that, unfortunately, we have many people who consider history anymore as being when they were born and when they die, and nothing happened before or after that. And I think that's one of the biggest misnomers that we play. We don't have the ability anymore to see the long term because we're in a day and age where everything is disposable and everything is the right now, not the right thing.
That's right. Edmund Burke once said, someone who doesn't care about his ancestors is not going to care what happened to his descendants.
That's us.
And that's us.
Yep.
We care about what happens in the next 5 to 10 minutes and maybe over the next 5 years. But as far as we're concerned, when we die, the world ceases to exist. So what the heck? If it makes your life easier and makes you more comfortable and makes people like you, for you to walk around babbling about the glories of multiculturalism and our diversity is our strength.
Right.
I mean, those things will help get you dates. They might help get you jobs. They might help you not get abused on social media. They're like social lubricants, and people who lack any intestinal fortitude or, frankly, any personal or moral integrity are the ones peddling those bromides, and they don't care what happens to the next generation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think the selfishness right now is defined by that, and of course, multiculturalism or cultural pluralism, if you will. That's wonderful, multiculturalism, if assimilation is somehow and unity is somehow attached in there, which we long ago left back in the state. We're going to talk more about this when we come back, Dr. Zmirak. Dr. John Zmirak, who is a columnist for The Stream, will be right back with us. So we talk about this whole idea of Ben Carson's comments on Muslims, on immigration, on migrants coming to the country, and now even on the Pope's visit, as we kind of meld it all together right here on the Gary Sutton Show. He'll be back with more right after this on News Radio 910 WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA with Dr. John Zmirak this morning, who writes for The Stream. We've been talking about Ben Carson and the whole idea of what he had to say about a Muslim president. Dr. John, we're in a day and age where I didn't realize how far we had descended into the hell of political correctness, if you will. until we really had the Trumps coming out and now the Carsons and other people saying things and not apologizing for them, as opposed to people constantly from the media browbeating you and saying, you got to say you're sorry. You got to say you're sorry. And of course, that's a double-edged sword, because you don't say you're sorry to people on the left sometimes, but you do say you're sorry if you're people on the right, and that's how you're supposed to give in and eventually give up, right?
Right. I memean, Donald Trump has a very firm policy. He doesn't even apologize when he's wrong.
Yeah, I heard him say something last week that was amazing. Someone said to him, it was one of the Sunday talk shows. It wasn't this past weekend, but the weekend before. And he said, you know what? He said, I will apologize in the future when I'm wrong. But he said, I don't expect that to happen. It was kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing, and I think that's part of what gets people, is he's having some fun with them at the same time. But the point's well made. That stop apologizing for what you believe and what you say. Say it and stand up for it and go from there.
Yeah, my only problem with Donald Trump is that he's changed, apparently, what he believes 180 degrees on a number of core issues, and I frankly don't believe him. I don't believe that he's suddenly pro-life. I'm not even convinced he's really against immigration. This is somebody who 4 years ago was calling Mitt Romney maniacal for wanting to cut off benefits to illegal immigrants. And suddenly we're supposed to believe that he's going to build a Berlin Wall along the southern border.
But you know what's interesting? I hear what you're saying, but you know what's interesting about it? And I'm not going to say whether or not he is, or I think you're looking at an old model, and the old model is that we had a club that we had to be in. We had to either be in a conservative club, we had to be in a liberal club, and I think you're seeing a major change in America right now, where people are thirsting so much for someone who has a pragmatic way of doing things instead of talking about them and thinking that's doing something, that they're willing to overlook almost anything. They're willing to overlook anything to get there. Not that Trump will necessarily become the nominee. He could, I guess, but the fact is that, it doesn't matter if you have a hard-fought philosophy. There's a lot of people saying that hasn't worked too well, has it, so far, by having the conservative philosophy, the liberal philosophy?
No, I would come back at them and say, who's a pragmatist? Mitch McConnell. Who's a pragmatist? John Boehner.
Well, and they're just as bad on the other end of the thing. Yeah, you're exactly right.
The do-nothing Republican leadership in Congress.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Those are the pragmatists. They are the Donald Trumps. Why don't we let's make Mitch McConnell the nominee? Donald Trump is more of a pragmatist with less of an ideological or philosophical base than anyone in the Republican Party.
But what is the difference? Look at the difference, though. You talked about the do-nothings. Trump has done something by being a pragmatist. In his particular field, he has built things. He's failed at times on things, and yet at the same time, he is still doing very, very well. And therein lies the great difference right now. And I think Trump laid it out last week in the debate when they asked him, he said, listen, I'm a businessman. My job is to go through days, use the rules, work my business, and build things. And that's what he does. Whereas you don't see McConnell and Boehner building anything. You're exactly right. It's a do-nothing kind of thing. So I said, therein lies the great difference I think the American people are looking at right now in this whole debate.
I think that people have an exaggerated sense of what Trump has built. He inherited $200 million, and that's a pretty good start in life. I'm a little more impressed with Marco Rubio, who came from nowhere. Now, he's not my favorite candidate, Marco Rubio, but he really did come from nowhere. His father was an immigrant waiter, and here he's a presidential candidate. He was not born with a gold spoon in his mouth.
But does it matter if you does it matter if you are in our country? I mean, I would argue with you. Does it matter if you are? Because if you're born with a gold spoon in your mouth, unless you lost the gold spoon, he didn't lose the $200 million that he inherited. In fact, he built on it. So the point is, I wouldn't dispute that. I mean, the guy has done something. I don't dispute that Marco Rubio came from some very mean backgrounds, and yet at the same time, he's a senator. What does he have to show for what he has done as a senator right now? What is he doing today? I have a difficult time when I hear a guy last week say, I don't go do votes right now as a senator from Florida, even though I'm not going to run again because I'm running to be president. Well, if you're going to run to be president, quit being a senator and stop not doing your day job.
Well, I don't think Donald Trump is spending a lot of time on his day job either. He
doesn't have to. It's a different situation. He was elected by the people to do his day job, and Rubio was. And there again lies a great difference that you have in the whole situation. That's all I'm saying is just you're not going to compare apples and oranges here and get the same thing. It doesn't work like that.
What I'm saying is if we're talking about what someone can accomplish, you compare where they are now with where they started out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Ben Carson is a lot more impressive. He comes from his
I don't disagree.
His child of a single mother who became one of the leading surgeons in America. So again, I think all the candidates are accomplished. Even Jeb Bush, who was born with several gold spoons in his mouth, he was a very effective governor of Florida. We don't have any losers left in the Republican field. But I just don't think we should single out Donald Trump and say he's the guy who's accomplished.
Nor do I. Nor do I.
He wasn't in politics.
But unfortunately, Donald Trump has done something. I heard Van Jones say something last week, and I'm no fan of Van Jones. But what he did is he came out and he said, when you had Kennedy understood TV at some of its earliest infancy here in running a presidential campaign with debates. And then later on, Obama understood the Internet. President Reagan understood entertainment. And now you've got a guy who understands how to take politics and make it a reality show. And that's Donald Trump. I thought it was a pretty interesting assessment.
That is an interesting observation.
Yeah. And I thought that's an interesting assessment. And for his particular part in the race, Trump's part in the race, I think that's what he's done. He's also, and I wanted to get your take on this, he's also taken the heat, I think, off a lot of the candidates because there are so many, and you can't really pinpoint them. He's taken the fire, and in doing so has kind of set the agenda in the long run about what's going to be talked about. You think the same thing on that?
Yes, I'm very glad that he's made immigration a front and center issue because it's something that the Republican elites have frankly been fooling their voters about.
I agree.
They've been pretending that they care about immigration when in fact what they want is cheap labor. They want cheap workers to build their hotels, to build their casinos, to work in their restaurants, and they don't care that those people, when the jobs go away, will be on welfare and that the kids they raise will vote Democrat.
Right.
Because by that point, those businessmen will be dead and they don't care.
Yeah, you can't win that argument by going to a different shade of beige. It doesn't work like that. Dr. Zmirak, I always enjoy talking with you. You're a very good person at discussion, and you've got some great points of view. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You too. Have a good day.
Take care. Thanks.